At 1:43 p.m., after the map refused to change, the man returned. Not dramatically. Not in the way fear imagines a return. There was no sudden wind against the courthouse windows. No unexplained sound in the archive hallway. No flicker in the lights. Nothing that would have made an ordinary person stop and say something strange was happening. That was what made it unmistakable. He always returned in the moments when the system no longer looked strange from the outside, but had become stranger than anyone inside it was prepared to admit. Eleanor Hayes was still standing in front of the board when the archive door opened. She did not turn immediately. Neither did Michael Carter. For several seconds, both of them stayed where they were, looking at the map that should not exist, at the lines that had refused to move, at the points of inevitability that had remained unchanged no matter what they did. The room had gone quiet in the way rooms do after people stop arguing because they have run out of certainty. That was where episode 8 had left them. They had discovered that the map did not care what they chose. They could shape the form of consequence. They could narrow impact or spread it. They could make an event sharper or wider, heavier or thinner, more local or more distributed. But the map itself remained. The structure underneath the event did not move. And now, standing in the archive with that knowledge still settling into place, Eleanor felt something even more unsettling than helplessness. Recognition. Not of the map. Of the kind of question that only appeared when the wrong questions had finally died. For most of the season, they had asked variations of the same thing. How do we control it? How do we predict it? How do we resist it? How do we stop it from spreading? Then the questions became more careful. How do we contain it? How do we choose the smaller cost? How do we avoid teaching it the wrong lesson? But after the map, none of those questions mattered the same way. There was only one left. Who has been inside this longer than we have? The door opened softly. No rush. No performance. Just the sound of someone entering a room where he already belonged. Only then did Eleanor turn. The man stood there in the same plain coat, boots carrying the faint dust of roads that never appeared on any map she knew. He looked exactly the way he had looked in the archive records, exactly the way he had looked when Michael first saw him after the storm split, exactly the way he had looked every time the system crossed some threshold no one else knew how to name. He was calm. Not because he did not understand what was happening. Because he understood it too well. Michael was the first to speak. You knew. The man did not answer immediately. His eyes moved from Eleanor to the board, then from the board to the chalk still resting on the table, then finally to the map itself. He nodded once. Yes. It was such a small answer that it took a second for the weight of it to land. Eleanor stepped toward him. You knew about the map. Again, he nodded. Yes. Michael's voice hardened slightly. And you didn't tell us. The man looked at him without defensiveness. You were not ready to see it. Michael almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. We were ready enough to build a network, track a changing system, watch control fail, watch resistance emerge, and learn that the system can choose its own direction. The man did not move. And only then, Michael continued, you decide we're ready? Eleanor raised a hand slightly, not to silence him, but to hold the room together long enough to hear the answer. The man finally stepped farther into the archive. You were ready to witness the map, he said. You were not ready to mistake it for power. Silence followed. Because that sentence did something dangerous. It explained him. And it accused them. Eleanor looked back at the board. The lines still held. Every point they had tested. Every consequence they had shaped. Every event they had thought they were changing. Underneath all of it, the same structure remained. She turned back toward him. What is it? His answer came with the patience of someone who had said some version of the truth many times and watched it misunderstood in many different centuries. It is not a map of the future, he said. It is a map of where choice enters consequence. Michael frowned. That's the same thing. No, the man said quietly. It is not. He walked toward the board. Neither Eleanor nor Michael stopped him. He stood beside the drawn lines, but he did not touch them. A map of the future tells you what will happen, he said. This tells you where what happens becomes difficult to escape. Eleanor felt that sentence settle much deeper than the others. Because that was the difference they had been circling without language for days. The map had never shown them outcomes. It had shown weight. Points where decisions mattered enough to leave marks that spread farther than the decision-maker intended. Michael crossed his arms. So all of this, he said, gesturing toward the board, all of Season 3, all these escalations, the system learning from us, resisting us, moving beyond us, all of that was inside this structure. Yes, the man said. And you knew that? Yes. Michael's jaw tightened. Who are you? The question did not sound theatrical. It sounded overdue. The man held his gaze. I am someone who learned too early what happens when people see this structure and think it belongs to them. That answer was not enough. And because it was not enough, it was probably closer to the truth than anything simpler would have been. Eleanor stepped closer. You're not just observing it. No, you're not part of the second network. No, you're not part of the silent network. No, she looked at him for a long second. Then what are you part of? The faintest change passed through his expression, not quite sadness, not quite memory, but something made of both. The warning, he said. Michael shook his head. That is not an answer. It is the most honest one I can give you yet. The word yet mattered. Eleanor caught it. That meant he had come back not only to confirm what they had seen, but to move something forward. The stranger had never returned merely to explain. He returned at turning points. And if he had come now, after the map, after the realization that direct control was impossible and indirect influence was deeper than they thought, then the next movement in the season would not be technical. It would be personal. Eleanor asked the question differently. What are we about to misunderstand? That made him look at her in a new way, as if some line she had crossed in the last few episodes had changed the kind of answer she could bear. The man who tries to control the system believes he is stronger than it, he said. The one who tries to predict it believes he is smarter than it. The one who tries to resist it believes he is outside it. He paused. The next mistake is worse. Michael's voice dropped. What is it? The man looked back at the board. You will believe the map makes you necessary. That landed harder than Eleanor expected. Because part of her had already begun to feel exactly that. If they could see where consequence entered the structure, then they mattered in a new way. Even if they could not alter the underlying map, they could stand at those points and shape how events unfolded. They could reduce harm, redirect intensity, choose the more livable cost. That felt like responsibility. But responsibility, she knew, could become identity very quickly. And identity always distorts judgment. Michael said what she was thinking in rougher language. You're saying we'll start believing we're important. I am saying, the man replied, that importance is one of the oldest traps in any system that learns from human choice. The archive went quiet again. Outside, Pine Ridge continued its ordinary afternoon as if nothing at all had changed. Cars moved through the square. Light shifted along the courthouse wall. Somewhere in the distance, someone closed a truck door too hard. The world kept performing normalcy with such confidence that Eleanor almost envied it. Inside, none of them were normal anymore. Not after the map. Not after the season they had lived through. Not after this man had returned and confirmed that the layer beneath decision was real. Michael looked at him carefully now, less accusatory, more exact. If you knew the map existed, then you knew the second network would eventually find some version of it too. Yes. And Daniel? The man gave the same answer. Yes. Michael exhaled slowly. Then this is not just about us finally seeing something. It's about who sees it next. The man nodded. Yes. That changed the room. Until that moment, the map had felt like revelation. Now it felt like vulnerability. Eleanor understood immediately. The map did not grant power. But it granted proximity. And proximity to a deep structure can be enough to ruin a person, a network, or a system if they mistake access for authority. She turned back to the board. If Daniel sees the map clearly enough, he will try to use it, Michael finished. And the second network? Eleanor asked. The man's answer came without hesitation. They will try to own it. Michael let out a low breath through his nose. And what are we supposed to do? The man looked at him steadily. Learn the difference between standing near a point of consequence and believing that point belongs to you. That was not tactical advice. It was worse. It was moral advice. And moral advice always arrives when technical skill has reached its limit. Eleanor felt the truth of that more sharply than Michael did. All season long they had climbed from observation into strategy, from strategy into compromise, from compromise into responsibility. Now the season was asking for something harder than strategy. Restraint without passivity. Presence without ownership. Influence without self-importance. She looked at the man. You came back with a warning. Yes. What is it? This time he did not delay. The map does not create the next danger, he said. The people who believe they can stand above it do. Michael went still. Eleanor did too. Because she understood instantly that he was not just speaking about Daniel, or the second network, or some abstract future group they had not yet seen. He was speaking about anyone. Which meant he was speaking about them too. The man stepped back from the board. For a long time, he said, you have been learning how the system moves. Now you must learn how people change when they believe they understand where movement comes from. That was the warning. Not the system. Not the spiral. Not the map. People. And in that moment, for the first time all season, Eleanor felt a fear that was not about consequence spreading through infrastructure or pressure mutating across networks. It was about what knowledge does to character. The stranger turned toward the door as if his part in the room had already ended. Michael said sharply, that's it. The man stopped but did not turn back. No, he said quietly. That is only the first warning. Then he added, the second is worse. And this time, neither Eleanor nor Michael tried to stop him. Because whatever came next in the season had already begun the moment he returned. In forgotten places, where knowledge arrives before. Wisdom, where maps reveal what people were never meant to possess lightly, justice does not shout. It whispers. And every act leaves an echo. At 1:52 p.m., the first sign of danger did not come from the system. It came from Daniel. He did not know it yet. No one in the control room did. But something had already shifted. For nearly an hour, Daniel Kessler had been studying the structure beneath the system. The map he had uncovered was no longer just a visualization. It was becoming a reference point. Every delay, every indirect adjustment, every convergence they had tracked began to align with it in ways that were too precise to ignore. It was no longer a discovery. It was a lens. The analyst stood beside him, reviewing the overlay again. It holds. Daniel nodded. Yes. The technician added, every major convergence aligns with it. Daniel did not respond. Because what mattered was not that it aligned. What mattered was what that alignment implied. He spoke quietly. We're not reacting anymore. The analyst frowned. What do you mean? Daniel answered slowly. We're ahead of it. That was the first shift. Subtle. Almost invisible. But critical. Across the world, Eleanor Hayes felt something similar. Not in the system. In the tone of the network channel. Voices that had once been cautious were now confident. Reports that had once described uncertainty now described alignment. She opened the channel and listened. Map confirms next convergence in the western grid. We can prepare earlier this time. Adjusting entry conditions in advance. Eleanor's expression tightened slightly. That was not how they had spoken before. Michael noticed. What is it? Eleanor answered quietly. They're changing. Michael listened for a moment. I hear it. Because the language had shifted. From observation. To assumption. From learning. To belief. Back in the control room, Daniel isolated the next point on the map. Not the largest. Not the most connected. But clear. A convergence forming within a communication relay system that linked multiple routing nodes across two regions. Smaller than the last event. But still aligned. The technician leaned forward. That's clean. Daniel nodded. Yes. The analyst asked, do we intervene? Daniel did not hesitate. Yes. He paused, then added, we adjust early. That was new. Before, they had waited. Observed. Confirmed. Now they were moving before the event formed. Across the world, Eleanor stepped toward the board. That's too early. Michael looked at her. They're just preparing. Eleanor shook her head. No, she paused. They're assuming. The difference mattered. Because preparation responds to reality. Assumption replaces it. Back in the control room, Daniel constructed the adjustment. Not a test. Not a minimal shift. A planned intervention. He adjusted conditions across the relay system before the convergence had fully formed. The technician watched. That's more aggressive. Daniel nodded. Yes. He paused. We don't need to wait anymore. The analyst hesitated. What if we're wrong? Daniel answered quietly. We're not. That was the second shift. Confidence. Across the world, Eleanor felt it immediately. Not in the system. In the decision. She closed her eyes briefly. That's too certain. Michael frowned. They have the map. Eleanor opened her eyes. So do we. She paused. That doesn't make it safe. The stranger stood near the doorway. Silent. Watching. Back in the control room, the system began to respond. Not directly. As always, it adjusted through conditions. The technician spoke. It's aligning earlier. Daniel nodded. Yes. The analyst added, that's faster than before. Daniel watched closely. Because speed had always been dangerous. The faster the system moved, the less room there was to correct. But now they were initiating that speed. Across the world, Eleanor saw it. The convergence point was forming sooner than expected. Not because the system accelerated naturally. Because the conditions had been shaped to bring it forward. She stepped closer to the board. They pulled it in. Michael looked at her. Is that bad? Eleanor answered slowly. It means they think they can control when it happens. She paused. And that's not something the map promised. Back in the control room, the convergence occurred. Earlier. Cleaner. More contained. The technician exhaled. That worked. Daniel nodded. Yes. The analyst added, that's better than last time. Daniel allowed himself a small pause. Not satisfaction. Not relief. Something closer to confirmation. We can use it. That was the third shift. Ownership. Across the world, Eleanor felt it like a change in air pressure. She spoke quietly. "He thinks he can use it." Michael nodded. "I think we all do." Eleanor shook her head. "No," she paused. "That's the problem." Because the map had not changed. It had not responded. It had not confirmed anything. They had changed. The stranger spoke for the first time in several minutes. "This is the first sign." Eleanor turned toward him. "Of what?" He answered calmly. "Of forgetting the warning." Back in the control room, Daniel moved to the next point. Not waiting. Not questioning. The technician asked, "Another one?" Daniel nodded. "Yes." He paused. "We stay ahead." The analyst hesitated. "Should we review the last result first?" Daniel shook his head. "We already know it works." That was the fourth shift. Momentum. Across the world, Eleanor stepped back from the board. "They're moving too fast." Michael asked, "Because it worked?" Eleanor answered, "Yes." She paused. "That's when it becomes dangerous. Because success removes hesitation." And hesitation had been the only thing keeping them careful. Back in the control room, Daniel initiated another adjustment. Earlier than before. More precise. More confident. The system responded. Again. Cleanly. The technician smiled. "That's two." Daniel nodded. "Yes." The analyst added, "We're getting better." Daniel did not correct him. Because part of him believed it. Across the world, Eleanor felt the pattern forming. Not in the system. In the people using it. She spoke softly. "This is not about the system anymore." Michael looked at her. "Then what is it about?" Eleanor answered, "How quickly we start believing we understand it." The stranger nodded. "Yes." Back in the control room, Daniel paused for a moment. Not because he doubted. Because he was considering something new. He spoke quietly. "If we map enough of these," the technician looked at him. "Yes." Daniel continued, "We can anticipate everything that matters." Silence followed. Because that was the sentence. The one that crossed the line. Across the world, Eleanor closed her eyes. She had not heard him say it. But she felt it. The shift from using the map to believing the map could define the system. She opened her eyes. "It's happening." Michael asked, "What is?" Eleanor answered, "He's starting to believe the map is complete." The stranger spoke quietly. "It never is." Back in the control room, the analyst spoke carefully. "That would mean no surprises." Daniel nodded. "Yes." He paused. "No uncertainty." The technician added, "That's control." Daniel did not say the word. But he did not reject it either. Across the world, Eleanor whispered, "That's the mistake." Michael looked at her. "What do we do?" Eleanor answered slowly. "We don't follow him." Because once belief replaced caution, the map would stop being a warning and start becoming a weapon. The stranger looked toward the door again. "This is how it begins." Eleanor asked, "What begins?" He answered calmly. "The belief that understanding the structure makes you necessary to it." Back in the control room, Daniel stood in front of the system. Watching. Planning. Moving earlier. Faster. More confidently. The system did not resist. It did not correct. It continued to respond. And that was the most dangerous part. Because nothing in the system was warning him that he was crossing a line. Across the world, Eleanor looked at the board one more time. The map had not changed. Not one line. Not one point. Not one connection. Only the people looking at it had. She spoke softly. This is not the system evolving. Michael nodded. No, Eleanor continued, this is us. In forgotten places, where knowledge begins to change those who hold it, where confidence grows faster than understanding, justice does not shout. It whispers. And every act leaves an echo. At 2:07 p.m., Daniel Kessler ignored the first warning. It did not sound like a warning. That was why it was easy to dismiss. The analyst spoke first. We should slow down. It was not a command. Not even a strong suggestion. Just a pause in tone. A slight resistance to the pace that had begun to define the last 15 minutes. Daniel did not look away from the display. Why? The analyst hesitated. Because we're moving faster than we understand. Daniel nodded once. We understand enough. That was the moment. Small. Almost invisible. But irreversible. Across the world, Eleanor Hayes felt it before she heard it. Not in the system. In the absence of hesitation. She stepped closer to the network channel, listening. No debate. No delay. No uncertainty. Just execution. She spoke quietly. He stopped listening. Michael looked at her. To who? Eleanor answered, to anything that slows him down. That was the difference. Because until now, doubt had been part of the system. It had shaped decisions. Limited them. Forced caution. Now it was gone. Back in the control room, the technician brought up the next convergence. Another one forming. Daniel glanced at it briefly. Where? Eastern Routing Cluster. Daniel nodded. Prepare the adjustment. The analyst stepped forward. We should confirm alignment first. Daniel did not hesitate. It's already aligned. The analyst tried again. We haven't verified the full structure. Daniel's voice remained calm. We don't need to. That was the second warning. Dismissal. Not of the system. Of the process that had protected them from themselves. Across the world, Eleanor closed her eyes. She did not need to see the data. She could feel the shift. He's skipping steps. Michael frowned. That's risky. Eleanor answered, he doesn't see it that way. Michael asked, how does he see it? Eleanor said quietly, as unnecessary. The stranger stood near the doorway. Silent. Watching. Back in the control room, Daniel constructed the adjustment. Faster than before. More confident. Less constrained. The technician watched carefully. That's aggressive. Daniel nodded. Yes. The analyst spoke again. If we're wrong, Daniel cut him off. We're not. That was the third warning. Certainty replacing verification. Across the world, Eleanor opened her eyes. That's it. Michael looked at her. What? Eleanor answered, he's not testing anymore. Pause. He's deciding. And that was a different kind of danger. Back in the control room, the adjustment executed. The system responded. Cleanly. Efficiently. Exactly as expected. The technician smiled. That worked again. Daniel nodded. Yes. The analyst remained quiet. But his expression changed. Because success was no longer reassuring. It was accelerating something. Across the world, Eleanor felt it. The pattern tightening. Not in the system. In the behavior. She spoke softly. He's being reinforced. Michael nodded. Yes. Because every success made the next decision easier. Faster. Less questioned. Back in the control room, Daniel moved immediately to the next point. No pause. No review. The technician asked, another? Daniel nodded. Yes. The analyst spoke more firmly this time. We need to reassess. Daniel did not turn. We are reassessing. The analyst frowned. How? Daniel answered, by continuing. That was the fourth warning. Momentum replacing reflection. Across the world, Eleanor stepped away from the board. That's how it breaks. Michael looked at her. What breaks? Eleanor answered, judgment. Because judgment requires space. And space had been removed. Back in the control room, the next adjustment began. Faster. More direct. The system responded again. Clean. Predictable. Aligned. The technician exhaled. That's 3. Daniel nodded. Yes. The analyst spoke quietly. This is too consistent. Daniel finally looked at him. Why is that a problem? The analyst hesitated. Because systems don't stay consistent like this. Daniel held his gaze. This one does. That was the 5th warning. Belief overriding pattern. Across the world, Eleanor felt the shift deepen. She spoke. Softly. He's rewriting the rules. Michael frowned. But the system is responding. Eleanor nodded. Yes. Pause. That's what makes it dangerous. Because the system was not resisting. Not correcting. Not warning. It was allowing. And that created the illusion of control. Back in the control room, the technician brought up another convergence. Larger. More complex. Daniel did not hesitate. Prepare adjustment. The analyst stepped forward again. This one is different. Daniel answered, they're all different. The analyst pressed. No. This is larger. Daniel shook his head slightly. Same structure. That was the 6th warning. Simplification. Reducing complexity to maintain confidence. Across the world, Eleanor spoke more firmly now. He's about to cross it. Michael asked, cross what? Eleanor answered, the line where the map stops helping. The stranger nodded. Yes. Back in the control room, Daniel executed the adjustment. No delay. No review. Full confidence. The system responded. But this time, something changed. Not immediately. Not obviously. The adjustment held. The convergence aligned. The outcome appeared correct. The technician said quietly, that worked. Daniel nodded. Yes. Then, seconds later, the system shifted again. Not at the point. Beyond it. The analyst leaned forward. What is that? Daniel's expression changed slightly. Because this was not expected. The system began adjusting in areas not connected to the convergence. Secondary systems. Tertiary connections. Indirect pathways. The technician's voice tightened. That's spreading. Daniel shook his head. No, but it was. Across the world, Eleanor felt it instantly. Her expression hardened. There it is. Michael looked at the board. That's new. Eleanor nodded. Yes. Pause. He pushed too far. Because this time, the adjustment had not just shaped the convergence. It had triggered something beyond it. Back in the control room, the analyst spoke urgently. That's not aligned with the map. Daniel stared at the display. Because he could see it. The spread did not match any structure they had tracked. The technician asked, what do we do? Daniel did not answer immediately. For the first time in several minutes, he hesitated. Across the world, Eleanor spoke quietly. This is the cost. Michael nodded. Yes. Because now, they were no longer shaping consequence. They were creating new ones. Unmapped. Unpredicted. Uncontrolled. Back in the control room, Daniel finally spoke. Stabilize. The technician moved quickly. The analyst added, we need to pull back. Daniel nodded. Yes. But something had already changed. Not just in the system. In him. Because for the first time, the map had not been enough. Across the world, Eleanor looked at the board. The lines still held. The structure remained. But something new had appeared. Something outside it. She spoke softly. He went beyond it. The stranger answered quietly. Yes. Michael asked, what does that mean? The stranger replied, it means the warning was real. Silence followed. Because now, they were no longer dealing with the system alone. They were dealing with what happens when someone believes they understand it too well. In forgotten places, where certainty replaces caution, where success hides the moment of failure, justice does not shout. It whispers. And every act leaves an echo. Whispers of Reckoning Season 3, Episode 9 Part 4, The argument no one could win. At 2:19 p.m., Eleanor Hayes stopped observing. And started speaking. The network channel had been active for less than 3 minutes since the anomaly appeared. But it already felt like too long. Reports were coming in from multiple regions. Unmapped behavior detected. Secondary systems adjusting without alignment. Spread beyond expected structure. The tone had changed. Not confident. Not controlled. Uncertain. Eleanor did not wait. Daniel. Her voice cut through the channel without force. But it carried something stronger than urgency. Clarity. In the control room, Daniel Kessler heard it immediately. He did not respond right away. Not because he had not heard her. Because he knew what she was going to say. Eleanor continued. You crossed the boundary. The technician glanced toward Daniel. The analyst stayed still. No one interrupted. Daniel finally spoke. We adjusted a convergence. Eleanor did not hesitate. No, she paused. You assumed the map was complete. That landed harder. Because it was not about the action. It was about the belief behind it. Daniel turned slightly, looking at the display rather than the room. The system responded exactly as expected. Eleanor answered immediately. Until it didn't. Silence. Because both statements were true. And that was the problem. Across the channel, others began listening more closely. Not speaking. Just listening. Michael Carter stepped closer to Eleanor. You want to pull him back? Eleanor nodded. Yes. She paused. Before he convinces himself this is still under control. Back in the control room, Daniel spoke again. We're stabilizing the spread. The technician confirmed. It's slowing. The analyst added quietly, but it's not aligning. Daniel did not respond to that. Instead, he spoke into the channel. We made a calculated adjustment. Eleanor replied, no. She paused. You made an assumption. That was the first real fracture. Not technical. Conceptual. Daniel's tone shifted slightly. What's the difference? Eleanor answered slowly. A calculation tests the system. She paused. An assumption replaces it. The word settled across the channel. Some agreed immediately. Others resisted. One voice spoke up. He had enough data. Another countered. Not for that scale. A third added, we've all been moving faster. The division was no longer subtle. Back in the control room, Daniel turned now. Not to the system. To the conversation. We are past testing. Eleanor's voice sharpened slightly. No, she paused. You're past questioning. That was the second fracture. The technician looked between them. Because now this was no longer about the system. Daniel answered, we've confirmed the structure. Eleanor shook her head, even though he could not see her. No, she paused. You've confirmed enough to feel certain. She paused again. That's not the same thing. Michael spoke quietly. She's right. Daniel did not respond to Michael. He spoke to the entire channel. If we hesitate every time we reach a convergence, we lose the advantage the map gives us. There it was. The word. Advantage. Eleanor closed her eyes briefly. Then opened them. That's exactly what he warned us about. The stranger remained silent. But he did not need to speak. Daniel continued, the map shows where decisions matter. He paused. If we move early, we shape outcomes. Eleanor answered, if we move too early, we create outcomes that don't belong to the map. The analyst spoke quietly. That's what just happened. Daniel turned toward him. We corrected it. The analyst hesitated. No, he paused. We contained part of it. He paused again. The rest is still moving. That was the third fracture. Reality. Across the world, Eleanor stepped closer to the board. This is what you're missing. Daniel did not respond. Eleanor continued, the map doesn't tell you what to do. She paused. It tells you where you can't pretend your choices don't matter. Silence. Because that was the difference. Between guidance and responsibility. Daniel spoke again. And we acted responsibly. Eleanor answered immediately. No, she paused. You acted confidently. That was the fourth fracture. Identity. Across the channel, voices rose again. He prevented a larger spread. He created a new one. We're still stabilizing. We shouldn't have triggered it. The system continued moving beneath all of it. Quiet. Unconcerned. Back in the control room, Daniel stepped forward. His voice remained controlled. But something had changed. This is not about being cautious anymore. Eleanor replied, that's exactly what it's about. Daniel shook his head slightly. No, he paused. This is about not wasting what we've learned. Eleanor's response came slower now. More deliberate. And what have we learned? Daniel answered, that we can shape the system. Eleanor said quietly, no, she paused. We can shape what happens inside it. She paused again. That's not the same thing. Michael added, and we don't understand the difference yet. Daniel did not respond to that. Because part of him knew it was true. And part of him could not accept it. The technician spoke softly. We're still seeing residual spread. The analyst added, and it's not following the map. That was the center of it. The part no one could ignore anymore. Eleanor spoke into the channel again. This is the line. Daniel asked, what line? Eleanor answered, the line where the map stops protecting you. Silence. Because protection had never been promised. But it had been assumed. Daniel's voice dropped slightly. We can correct this. Eleanor replied, you can respond to it. She paused. But you can't undo what created it. That was the fifth fracture. Irreversibility. Across the channel, fewer voices spoke now. Because the argument had moved beyond preference. Into truth. Daniel looked at the system. Then back at the data. Then finally, for a moment, he stopped speaking. Across the world, Eleanor did the same. For a few seconds, the entire network paused. Not because the system stopped. Because they did. Then Daniel spoke again. More quietly. We made progress. Eleanor answered, yes. She paused. And this is what it cost. Neither of them raised their voices. They did not need to. The stranger finally spoke. Not to interrupt. To conclude. This is the argument you cannot win. Eleanor looked at him. Why? He answered calmly. Because both of you are right. Michael frowned. That doesn't help. The stranger nodded. No, he paused. It never does. Back in the control room, Daniel exhaled slowly. For the first time in several minutes, he was not pushing forward. Across the world, Eleanor stepped back from the board. Neither of them had changed the other's mind. Because this was not about agreement. It was about what each of them was willing to accept. Daniel spoke one final time into the channel. We continue. Eleanor did not answer immediately. Then she said, we do. She paused. But not the same way. That was not resolution. It was separation. In forgotten places, where even those who understand the system cannot agree on how to use it, where every choice reflects a different belief about responsibility, justice does not shout. It whispers. And every act leaves an echo. At 2:34 p.m., the system stopped being the most important thing in the room. Because the consequences of what they had done were no longer theoretical. They were visible. Not in a single location. Not in a contained system. Everywhere. The first report came from a region that had not been part of the original convergence. Secondary routing instability detected. Then another. Energy balancing inconsistencies across linked nodes. Then more. Delayed corrections appearing outside map structure. The analyst spoke first. That's not part of the map. Daniel Kessler stared at the display. Because he could see it clearly now. The new behavior did not align with any of the points they had tracked. It did not follow the structure they had relied on. It was something else. The technician's voice tightened. It's spreading beyond mapped zones. Daniel did not respond immediately. Because that was the moment. The one where belief meets reality. Across the world, Eleanor Hayes felt it fully now. Not as a pattern. Not as a delay. As disruption. She stepped closer to the board. The map had not changed. But the system had. She spoke softly. This is outside it. Michael looked at her. Outside the map. Eleanor nodded. Yes. Pause. And that should not be possible. The stranger stood near the doorway. Watching. Back in the control room, Daniel spoke quietly. We triggered this. No one disagreed. The analyst added, this wasn't in the structure. Daniel nodded. No, pause. Because we created it. That was the realization. Not that the system had failed. That they had gone beyond it. Across the world, Eleanor closed her eyes. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she opened them. This is what he meant. Michael looked at her. The warning. Eleanor nodded. Yes. Pause. It wasn't about the system. Back in the control room, the technician spoke again. Spread is increasing. The analyst added, and it's not stabilizing. Daniel looked at the display. Then finally, he stepped back. For the first time in a long time, he stopped trying to fix it immediately. Because now, he understood something he had been avoiding. They were no longer inside the rules they had learned. Across the world, Eleanor spoke quietly. He believed the map was complete. Michael nodded. And it wasn't. Eleanor continued, no, pause. It was never supposed to be. The stranger spoke softly. The map shows where consequence gathers. Pause. It does not show what happens when you force it. Silence followed. Because that was the missing piece. Back in the control room, Daniel repeated it quietly. What happens when you force it? The words felt different now. Not theoretical. Real. The analyst spoke carefully. So what is this? Daniel answered slowly. This is outside the structure. Pause. This is us. Across the world, Eleanor stepped closer to the board. She drew a new line. Not part of the original map. Not aligned with any known point. It cut across the structure. Disruptive. Uncontained. Michael watched. That doesn't belong there. Eleanor nodded. No, pause. But it exists. The stranger spoke quietly. Yes. Back in the control room, the technician asked, what do we do? Daniel did not answer immediately. Because every answer he had used before, no longer applied. He spoke quietly. We stop. The analyst looked at him. Stop what? Daniel answered, everything. That was the shift. Across the world, Eleanor exhaled slowly. Yes. Michael looked at her. You agree? Eleanor nodded. Yes. Pause. We've gone too far. Back in the control room, the technician hesitated. If we stop, the system keeps moving. Daniel nodded. I know. The analyst asked, then how do we contain this? Daniel answered, we don't. Silence. Because that was not what anyone expected. Across the world, Eleanor spoke softly. We let it resolve. Michael frowned. That could take time. Eleanor nodded. Yes. Pause. And that's the cost. The stranger watched them both. You are learning. Back in the control room, Daniel looked at the system again. For the first time, he was not trying to stay ahead. Not trying to shape. Not trying to control. He was watching. The system moved. Not aligned. Not predictable. But slowly, it began to settle. The technician spoke quietly. It's stabilizing. The analyst added, not cleanly. Daniel nodded. No, pause. But it's finding its own balance. Across the world, Eleanor felt it too. The disruption did not disappear. But it softened. Integrated. Became part of the system again. She spoke softly. It's absorbing it. Michael nodded. Yes. Because the system was not broken. It was adapting. Even to what they had forced into it. The stranger stepped forward slightly. This is the second warning. Eleanor looked at him. What is it? He answered calmly. That you are not the only ones who can change what this becomes. Silence. Because that meant something larger. Back in the control room, Daniel understood. They were not alone. Not in influence. Not in consequence. He spoke quietly. We're not the only ones inside this. Across the world, Eleanor nodded. No, Michael asked, who else? The stranger did not answer directly. Instead, he said, the moment you believed the map made you necessary, pause. You stopped asking who else was already here. That was the reveal. Not complete. But enough. Back in the control room, Daniel looked at the system one last time. He no longer saw something to control. Or something to master. He saw something shared. He spoke quietly. We need to start asking different questions. The analyst asked, like what? Daniel answered, who else is shaping this? Across the world, Eleanor looked at the board. The original map. The new line she had drawn. The disruption they had created. She spoke softly. This isn't about the system anymore. Michael nodded. No, Eleanor continued, it's about the people inside it. The stranger smiled faintly. Yes. In forgotten places, where knowledge reveals not just structure, but the people who move within it, justice does not shout. It whispers. And every act leaves an echo. You have been listening to whispers of reckoning. They believed the system was the danger. Then they believed the map would give them control. But in the end, they discovered something far more difficult to accept. The warning was never about the system. It was about them. And what comes next would not be about understanding the map. It would be about understanding who else had already learned to use it.